Hi guys, my name's Christine and I'm a dating, relationship and personal development coach. And today I'm talking about why you have to drop the grumpy attitude that you may have if you want to have more success with the people that you're dating. Because being grumpy and being miserable is not a virtue. It's not going to make people more attracted to you. In fact, it's going to do the opposite. It's going to turn them off. Now, it may be the case being grumpy and being depressing and saying, basically complaining about your life all the time. It may attract some people if they have the same kind of attitude, if they have the same kind of mindset, because birds of a feather, tend to flock together, right? But even then, even if you meet up with someone who has the same kind of grumpy attitude, then eventually they're going to get sick of it as well. Like, they're not going to feel good around you. And basically, when you are dating people and you're trying to find someone to be with, it's best to drop the negative, grumpy attitude. And this is something that I've learned because I still have I have a very strong tendency to be negative, to be grumpy. My family has a history of things like depression, like mental health issues. So I'm prone 100% to having like a really grumpy, negative attitude, right? But it's something that I had to overcome if I wanted to make the people that I liked more attracted to me. So when I was growing up, I thought, oh, if I acted, woe is me, maybe they would, think I'm really deep and brooding and they would really like me because of that. But the exact opposite happened. So when I started dating women that I really liked and I had this kind of attitude, basically it would turn them off me, and that really hurt and that really sucked, and I didn't know why that didn't work, basically. But what you've got to realize is, and what I did come to realize after finding dating information myself and starting to improve my game, basically, I realized that if you want someone to like you, they have to associate positive feelings with you. And if you're always negative and you're a downer and you're always grumpy, that's not going to make them feel good around you. That's going to make them feel down, down and grumpy themselves. So if you want someone to like you, you need to make them want to be around you. And if you're always grumpy all the time, you're actually going to repel them, because each time they hang out with you, they end up feeling just as miserable as you are feeling. Right? And if they feel miserable around you, they're not going to want to spend time with you. They're going to be more drawn to the other people that they may be dating who are more fun and uplifting and positive, because they make them feel good, even if that person is someone who's a bit of a negative Nelly as well. So one of the things that really helped me, drop the grumpy attitude, basically, was, first of all, learning that. That was a big one, because that was like a huge goal in my life, was to find someone to settle down with and be with. And I realized eventually over time and learning dating stuff myself that being grumpy, being depressive, being broody wasn't actually going to help. Now, like I said, I still have a tendency to think on the negative side. So what you got to do, and what I did, is I learned ways to switch things around in my own head to see it in more of a positive light. And one of the greatest people that whose work I've ever come into contact with, is Dr. Wayne Dyer. Now, Dr. Wayne Dyer, is very, very positive teacher. Unfortunately, he's deceased now, but his books and his lectures have really made my life much more positive. And I've been able to, from someone who just always had negative thoughts, primarily, not always, obviously, but let's say like 90% of the time, to someone who can actually switch around those thoughts in my head and look at the more positive light. And you've probably heard me talk about these sort of things over the videos that you may have watched of mine. If you haven't come across this, if this isn't the first time you've ever come across my channel, but basically how I arrange things in my own head. Usually which I think is the same for a lot of people, but usually I go to worst case scenario when something happens in my life, right? It could be, back in the days when I was getting rejected, or it could have been something like getting a bad result on a test when I was at school, things like that. I would go to the first worst case scenario, which is, oh, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I always get things wrong, oh, no girls like me, those kinds of negative conclusions that you sometimes go to and you jump to straight away. So what I learned to do over time, even though my mind still tends to jump to the negative thing straight away, I've learned how to combat it by looking at looking at the situation, looking at the problem from a different angle. So, for example, let's say I was dating someone and they rejected me, right? And my first conclusion was to think, oh, this is because I'm stupid, this is because I'm ugly, this is because I never seem to get the girls that I like, something like that. I jumped to that worst case scenario. But then I start to look at it from a different angle, like, oh, and this is what something Dr. Wayne Dyer helped me with, right? So one of these things is like, oh, I could look at it as, oh, perhaps this just wasn't meant to be. Perhaps they weren't compatible with me. Perhaps, later down the road, it would have ended badly anyway. Perhaps, by being with this person, I could have gone into an accident or something. Or perhaps by being with this person, I would have ended up even more miserable. Or perhaps by being with this person, I could have lost good connections with my friends and my family, because you just don't know. Right? You don't know how, your life is going to pan out when you start dating someone, right? So that's kind of like so looking at it from that kind of way is really good, and kind of having that, looking at it from different angles and trying to switch it to a more positive one makes it less intense, makes the situation less intense, and it makes it less painful as well. So, you can use that kind of method for anything. So let's say you lost a job opportunity, right? You was hoping to get a certain career, you applied for a job, you went for an interview, but they declined and they said they no longer wanted you. That could hurt, that could sting, that could be really, that could feel really bad. If that happens to you, you might jump to, oh, I never get the jobs that I want, they don't like me because I'm stupid, because I'm ugly, or whatever it may be. But then you look at it from different angles, like, oh, maybe this was just meant to be. Perhaps if I went with this job, they would have given me more responsibility than I could handle, and I'd be stressed out. Or perhaps, I could have, if I took this job, I could have been driving to work one day and got in an accident. Maybe this was just meant to be, and you start looking at it at different angles. And that's what personally helped me. And I learned a lot of that kind of thing from Dr. Wayne Dyer, to look at situations in different ways, basically, and not always jumping to and kind of believing the first thing that your mind says to you. So having different ways to look at things can really, really help. And one of his most famous lines that Dr. Wayne Dyer says is, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So if you look at things at a different angle, how you start to what you believe about that situation starts to change and becomes different. So truly, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change if you start looking at them from different points of view. And it can make the situation less intense, and it can make you feel less grumpy, less pessimistic about certain negative things that happen in your life. So when you're out on a date with someone and you can feel yourself, you're in a bit of a grumpy mood, which has definitely happened to me. Sometimes if I've been out on a date, when I was back in the dating world and, I was out on a date and I wasn't feeling it, perhaps I was feeling really sad for whatever reason, perhaps I was just feeling negative, perhaps I was just really tired that day and I kind of wanted to just sit there and wallow in my own sort of grumpy, sad attitude, then what I would do is I would just, if I did feel negative, then whenever, I was talking to the person that I was on a date with, I would just say to her things like, oh, well, yeah, I've got a lot of things going on in my life right now, and I might list them, but I'll try and be positive about it, especially if she brings it up. She might even say to me something like, oh, you look really down. What's going on? And I'll be like, oh, well, yeah, I've just, this just happened to me, but you know what, I know this is all going to work out anyways, it's probably for the best, yeah, it sucks right now, but, I'm trying to look at it positively and things like that, and just not being negative and just sitting there and complaining about your life when you're on a date, because it's not going to help them feel more attracted to you. In fact, it's going to do, more than likely, it's going to do the opposite. It's more likely for them to be put off you if you're being negative and just being miserable. And you've probably been you got to see it this logically as well, because if you've ever been around someone who is miserable, all of the time, who only has a bad word to say, who's never got anything positive to say, who's just complaining about the government, about their lives, about how much money they're earning. They're just blaming everything on everyone else apart from themselves. and they just have this really bad negative attitude, it makes you feel like, oh God, it just makes you feel drained. So that's how a person is going to feel when they're out on a date with you. If you keep on complaining, being grumpy, being miserable, only have got a negative thing to say, they're going to feel that way too. And we've all been in situations where we're around someone who's completely miserable, and it just makes you feel bad, it makes you feel drained, it makes you want to avoid them. And if you're on a date with someone that you really like, who you find is like 10 out of 10, they're beautiful or handsome, whatever it may be, whatever you're looking for. If they've got that and they're the complete package for you, and you just ruin it by making them feel bad, then that's not what you want. What you want is for them to want to be around you. You don't want to repel them. And being grumpy and being negative is going to repel them. It may be the case that you can go out on a few dates with them, especially if they're really, really attracted to you as well. But eventually they're going to get sick and tired of it, and they're going to want to avoid you, because every time they're around you, they just feel miserable because you've got this horrible, grumpy attitude. And it's a hard lesson to learn. And it was a hard lesson for me to learn as well, to realize that being grumpy, negative, and brooding wasn't actually going to make me successful with women. And the exact opposite is true. You have to be positive, and even if you are going through a lot of horrible things, you've got a job that you hate, you don't have enough money, you feel miserable, you've got to try and make it into a positive. So when these topics come up, you don't just sit there and complain. You actually, try, even though you're going through something tough, you can say that, well, oh yeah, at the moment my life is pretty tough, but I'm trying to figure things out, I'm working on myself, I'm trying to see the positives. And I think I'm going to get through this. It's hard right now, but I'm going to get through this, and maybe this is all going to teach me a great lesson eventually, and it's all going to become clear in the end, even though right now it kind of sucks a little bit. But I'm working on it, and I know it's going to turn out fine in the end. And if you have that kind of attitude, and you can kind of put that kind of positive twist on it, no matter what you're going through, even if it's something like as dramatic as a divorce, or you've just lost someone in your life to like an illness, or they just died unexpectedly. If you just try and say that, yeah, I'm going through a tough situation, but I know I'm going to get through it, and I know it's all going to teach me a lesson in the end, and I know I'm going to be stronger for it. If you can just put that, just a positive twist on it, can really, really help. And make the conversation less negative. And if you're dwelling on this like a negative topic for a while you're on a date, try and change the subject. Just say, yeah, this is really helping me grow right now. It is tough, but I'm going to be better for it. And then you just switch to something else. You ask them about themselves, like, oh, how are you doing? Like, what are you doing with your job right now? Or, how is your relationship with your family, and how's that going for you? Try and switch it around, so you don't dwell on it for too long, because if you are dwelling on things that you do feel really bad about, then it's going to come across in your your vibe, right? If you start dwelling on things too much and talking about things too much that you're not 100% happy with. So try and just switch the conversation to something else when those kinds of things come up. And if you do have to talk about it, try and put that positive twist on it, about how it's helping you grow, how it's helping you become more, how it's strengthening you in some way. Even if you're not, even if it is tearing you down. Sometimes you have to, if you really want to attract someone into your life, you have to stay away from those negative subjects and kind of sugarcoat it a little bit, because you can't get too deep with someone who you've only just met, especially if you've only been on a few dates with them, or it's the first date and they're not your girlfriend or your boyfriend yet. Right? If they're not your girlfriend or your boyfriend yet, you shouldn't use them as a way to get your emotions out and to complain about your life, and to use them in that way, and to or try to attract them by being negative, because you think falsely, like what I did, by being brooding and depressing was somehow some kind of virtue that seemed romantic, when it's the exact opposite is true. Like it turns people off, right? And you don't want to be negative. Don't speak about negative things, right? If you've got things going on in your life that you're unhappy with, that is, making you feel really horrible, perhaps it's giving you mental health issues, you need to talk to a therapist about it, right? The person you're on a date with is not your therapist, right? You need to talk to a professional if you're going through really horrible things. It's not their job. It's not the person that you're on a date with, their job to fix you. You have to do that yourself, and sometimes with the aid of a therapist, that can really, really help. So you've got to drop the grumpy attitude if you want to attract someone into your life, because It's not going, by being grumpy, it's not going to help anyone feel more attracted to you. In fact, it's going to do the opposite. It's going to put them off you if you're grumpy and miserable all the time. And it was a hard lesson that I learned. And like I said, I still struggle with being grumpy by being, a bit negative. And my mind usually does jump automatically to the worst case scenario. In fact, I have ongoing, like, some mental health issues. Like, one of the things that I go through a lot is panic attacks, right? I don't have as much now, but like last year I was having a panic attack nearly every week, where my heart rate would just rapidly just go up for no reason, and I thought I was dying. I thought I was having a heart attack. And it would just be happening at simple times, like, I was just cooking, or I was just eating my dinner, or I was just sitting down. I would just have a random panic attack. And it's all from sort of things that stem back from my childhood, situations that I went through that weren't really that nice. And I've suffered for it, right? And I still have that tendency to think on the negative side. But luckily, you can combat it. You can do the work within yourself. And like I said, one of the people that really helped me with that and has made me like 100 times better than what I was when I was a teenager and when I was in my early 20s was Dr. Wayne Dyer. In fact, I completely thank all of my new positive habits, the new ways that I can control my own thoughts, down to Dr. Wayne Dyer. And has also led me on a much more spiritual path as well, and led me more in connection to my own personal religion and things like that. So that's my advice. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to get in touch with me personally, then please go to www.christineloveridge.com. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall talk to you again very soon. Goodbye.